We will continue on to our last keynote of the night. Sunil Nagaraj, please come on stage.
Did you have the clicker? Oh, clicker's over there. Thank you very much. Hey everybody, good to see you. Thanks for sticking around to the very end. I'll try to make this worth your while. So I've been a member of this community for a few years. Consider it a big privilege to be up here sharing some of my recommendations on how I think we can grow this community and this ecosystem and this business 10x. I will be available afterwards for questions and thoughts, and please reach out to me if I can be helpful. So we will see if this clicker steps forward. Perfect. So we have a simple agenda, 3 easy steps in order to grow NewSpace 10x. First is dispelling some common myths. I feel pretty strongly about this, so we'll get into this in a second. Then we'll talk about building agreement on how NewSpace should actually work in order to get this 10x growth. And then finally, the meaty part, how to nail securing venture capital. So first, let's start with something fun. This is a little girl named Anavi. It's my daughter. It's a photo when she's 6 months old. Happy to report she's now a year old and she's starting to learn English. So now when folks say things like space is hard, she can understand that. She wants to be a future rocket scientist, but when she hears space is hard or space is tricky or wow, that was really difficult, she gets scared away from space. This applies to her, it applies to a lot of other people. I think we're here in Silicon Valley, we have the chance to bring in a lot of folks if we stop saying space is hard. So that's the first thing is, I know it is a tricky thing. We are smart people and have achieved a lot by getting to space, but we can no longer say space is hard. We're actually doing ourselves a big disservice in that regard. The next myth is that space is for billionaires. It's for philanthropists, it's for dreamers. We have to stop saying this as well. This is hurting our industry by saying that it's only accessible for folks who do this as a hobby. We need to convince folks that space is an attractive, easy to get into, lucrative area to make an impact and make a lot of money. That's how we grow NewSpace even further, not by saying it's harder for billionaires. In fact, there's data that backs this up, and we all know that CubeSats, et cetera, now make space accessible to everyone. The parallels between computers filling up a room and needing to have special key card access to touch the computer versus today, any kid can play with the Raspberry Pi are very apt in this regard. So the key is let's make space sound easy so that we attract more people and capital. The second piece here, step 2, let's agree on how NewSpace should work. So there are several reasons why NewSpace is now interesting. We've heard lots of talks over the last 3 days about this idea. I won't go into these, but the key is that there are several reasons it is now possible for NewSpace to exist. Most of these were not true 10 years ago. Some were not true 5 years ago. And Rocket Lab is one of the, CubeSat standards, Peapod dispensers, availability of launch, spaceflight brokering launch, all these things have kind of come together. Now that it's there, now we need to figure out what to do with this. And so this is the roadmap here. So if we think about how a new space company should launch, how it should operate, this is what this slide is really focused on. I think the first piece is for us to acknowledge kind of what tools are now offered. We can now put up a sensor in LEO or GEO, we can talk to it, we can launch items, we can recoup them, we can put stuff on station. There are certain toolkits. And again, to bring it back to the tech analogy, I love making tech analogies, partially because tech is 80% of what I do. In the last 10 years, MySQL became a thing, Apache, LAMP, AWS. So now we know anyone with a little bit of training can build a mobile app that takes in information, stores it somewhere, and spits it back out. And then you can build things like Uber, you can build things like Tinder, but it starts with this knowledge of the underlying tool set, the underlying toolkit. And everyone in this room is fully aware of what space can do, just functionally, that these are the things we can do. Now we need to take this and then go out into the world, ideally, and I'm biased, as far away from space as possible and find customers that would find those tools, if assembled properly, they would find them valuable. The example of Uber, this is knowing how relational databases work in Objective-C. You now go to the taxi industry and you can have a $50 billion company. It wasn't by selling back into the tech community. And so here, I think there are lots of companies that sell back into the space ecosystem. I think that's a great place to start. I think that there are many, many, many other markets that have yet to be touched with this toolkit that we know, whether it's remote sensing, communication, microgravity, other areas that are still being explored. I hope that the new entrepreneurs will actually be masters of uncovering a new pocket of latent demand or a new opportunity for using these tools rearranged in a different way to address an industry very, very far away from space, because I think that brings new dollars into the space sector. Once we do that, I hope that we adopt this agile iterative process. Steve Blank, lean startup, the idea that you sort of build, test, build, test, build, test. I think even Steve on Tuesday talked about simulation software and how you can now run the whole launch in a computer, iterate it, iterate it, iterate it. That agility is actually critical to tech startups, and it can be defining for space startups if we embrace that idea. What's central to this, the word customer appears twice already, is that a lot of this is customer-driven development. We have to transition from an industry that thinks about what could be done to what do customers want us to do. And that's tricky because space historically was a little difficult. Now it's getting easier. So now, in the same way in the tech industry, you can build anything anyone can think of. The question is what to build, not how to build it. How to build it, 6 months and a few engineers, you can build anything in the tech industry. We're approaching that with space. So now we really need to focus in on customer interests and see what they'll pay for. In the tech world, there's this flywheel of innovation, and I would like to see this come to aerospace. In the tech world, someone graduates computer science from Stanford, goes and works at Google. A few years later, they're fed up with their boss, or they have this cool new idea, so they leave Google, launch a company. When they do that, they raise money at the bottom right. They grow the company, and eventually they get acquired, maybe by Google, maybe by Microsoft, maybe by Cisco. And a few years later, they get fed up with their boss and start the whole cycle again. We don't see a lot of that in the, I don't see a lot of that in the aerospace sector. And this is an important part of the equation, that if NewSpace is building customer-driven features and iterating quickly, then we can start to have this flywheel where folks from innovative companies spin out, launch their own. I'm not a disinterested party here. I'm part of that bottom right bucket there on funding. But they can then grow, get purchased, we get liquidity, and that fuels the ecosystem, and it keeps spinning further and further. I think really, really critical part, and this is not yet working, and I think it's actually really important to ensure the longevity of this new space movement beyond the next downturn, is that we need to see this wheel turning. So the third piece here, so we talked about the myths. Now let's talk about VC funding. I offer these as humble thoughts on how you could play the game to secure venture capital better. So first, let's understand the mindset of VCs. I think a lot of, when I was an entrepreneur in 2009, I didn't understand this at all. So a VC's job is to take capital, take money from someone, something. So let's pretend a university like Yale were to give a VC capital, allocate capital. Then the VC turns around and meets startups and decides which startups to invest that capital in. This is done in the context of a 10-year fund. So if you were to hear about Sequoia, let's just pick a firm, they actually might be investing out of Sequoia 4 or Sequoia 5. And so it's a 10-year fund. And as a result, when they invest out of that fund has a conclusion date, in a sense. And that's up to 10 years out, but let's say you caught them in year 3. So they kind of have 7 years. So that's part of the reason why they need to see a return. The more important reason that they care about time horizon, or that we care about time horizon, is that internal rate of return, IRR there. There's a threshold that we are trying to achieve to justify the level of risk that we're taking with, in this case, Yale's capital. So sometimes the fund is aiming to return 3x. So if we raised a $100 million fund, or let me speak about Bessemer, a $1.6 billion fund, the goal would be to try to turn that into many multiples of $1.6 billion over the course of 10 years, but sort of finish in that window. So whenever we, I'll point to some of the implications. If we're pitched a company that has an exit potential like 12 years from now, we're just not set up to do that, right? You have to find a different source of capital. Ideally, the companies that VCs can fund are ones that see meaningful appreciation, kind of risk reduction points every 12 months or so, and have options for liquidity and a potential to sell or go public in 3, 5, 7 years, something like that. What we do is we meet several hundred companies, and most VCs you meet will make 1 to 2 investments a year. So it's a really, really tight filter as well. Even when we do that, we invest in 1 to 2 a year, and we raise a new fund every 3 or 4 years, 2, 3, 4 years. So it's actually a ton of pressure on VCs as well to get this right, because if you make 1 or 2 or 3 mistakes, you may not be able to raise your next fund, hence the tightness of the filter. The whole point of this game is that risk is okay if the company works, it dramatically pays off the ones that don't work. Oftentimes, it's 1 out of 10 investments pays for the other 9 that don't work out so well. For that to happen, the companies that we're looking for have ridiculously strange, extraordinary growth. Blue Apron went public today, and that was a company where we invested very early at Bessemer. And in 4 or 5 years, it's grown from 0 to, I forget the exact revenue number, but 1 million monthly subscribers to the service. So just tremendous growth. So once in a while it happens, and those are the strange companies we're looking for, but that allows us to take risky investments where many of them may fail completely. So this is a picture of sort of the way that these companies work, is that you may pitch a company for VC where you spend a little bit of money. That's the y-axis. You spend a little bit of money, and if it works, you make a little bit of money. Think of this as revenue or cash flow or profit. Any of them will work fine. And you have high certainty that's going to work. This is not the kind of business VC is set up for. It's actually set up for businesses that look like this. And again, this is not saying that blue arrow is going to happen. There can be a 1% chance of that happening, but that's the only way we'll look at this business, because we're looking for businesses that have the chance to pay off a lot of other losers. And so sometimes people call it the tail of the outcomes curve, but unless you have something like this, venture capital is not really the right place to go. There are other sources of capital that are better suited for a tighter outcomes band, because this band, I drew the blue arrow, but it clearly could be 0 as well, and that's okay because the model's set up for that. So this is giving you a little more context on how VCs think about this. So the goal, we covered this, is that these businesses have an upfront cash consumptive period followed by really high margin afterwards. Example of Google, they take a year to build a search engine, and then after that, they don't have to do a whole lot of new work on the core search engine product to get it to work for user number 1 million or user number 1 million in 1. The marginal cost is low. The next piece of the VC funding is, which I think is dramatically underappreciated, is figuring out where you are in your company and approaching the right kind of VC. There's a lot of words like Series A, pre-seed, all these things. I think it's better to just think about what you're doing in your business. So are you exploring a potential product, trying to see if customers might bite, trying to figure out the feature set, or are you, do you have the product that's in their hand and you're trying to figure out how much they'll pay and how many customers are like them? Or are you finally, you have something that works and you're trying to scale? And these correspond roughly to these ideas of friends and family or seed if you're in the exploration phase. And there's a different set of investors you should talk to than if you're sorting out the business, which would be Series A, or if you're scaling something that already works. You already know how many, you have 20 customers and there's 500 more. You want to raise money to go attack those next 500 customers. That would be Series B or growth stage investors. So this is an important framework so that you decide whether you're ready to, I mean, the previous slide was, is this even the kind of business that should approach venture capital ever? Most successful businesses don't take venture capital, but a few that grow like crazy or have a chance to should, and then you should figure out which type of investor. This is a rough picture of sort of stage. More left means earlier, more right means later. And so these are some of the firms that I know, and I know they're active in the space sector. And if you're earlier, start talking to the ones on the left. If you're later, start talking to the ones on the right. Now the question is sort of how do you actually approach them? How do you find VCs? How do you approach them? And so having been at Bessemer for 6 years, meeting a few thousand companies along the way, I can tell you the things I wish would happen more. So generally, folks who are investing in something kind of know the technical jargon, but I love it when people don't use any technical jargon at all. I love it when it's a really simple explanation of what the product is. I love understanding it and then going deeper afterwards. I hate hearing words like synergy and platform and collaboration, sort of broad, high-level stuff. I just want to know that, hey, we have this radar dish and it talks to satellites and it sends signals back and forth. That's a great explanation. And in that initial window of approaching a VC, we'll talk about how to do it, but in that initial window, if you can also highlight customer input. Customer is sort of a key theme of today's conversation. And if you can highlight that early, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have paying customers. If you once bumped into a potential customer on an elevator and they smiled when you told them your idea, tell me that. That's helpful input. Because if you don't tell me those things, then myself and other VCs, we just kind of guess. Oh, I bet people would never want to share photos that disappear, right? Like instead, if you can say, hey, we have 5 million DAU, daily active users we launched last week, or with satellites, we described this thruster to somebody and they said they wanted to talk to us about ordering 5, that's super helpful input if you can highlight that early. So it doesn't have to be signed contracts. In terms of the tactical, just to touch on this for a second, I mean, there's lots of different ways. You know, today we're at a conference. I would say if with email outreach, short emails are the key to everything in life. You know, 1 or 2 sentences, not paragraphs. Adding more and more stuff doesn't help. You really want to understand the VC mindset of, I said we meet 500, 800. We probably hear about 3 or 4 times as many. And so for better or worse, there's a few seconds of just sort of quickly understand it and then decide to go deeper. And so if your initial email outreach to VCs, you can do cold outreach. My own email is put all over the internet, and I do that way. Other folks say find a warm lead into my network. Either way, you still want to have that initial outreach. Be really tight, really concise, highlight customer outreach, and just have 1 attachment, no more than that. If folks don't answer, you are totally allowed to be persistent until you get an answer. But once you get an answer, then there's a different set of etiquette. But a lot of folks just are bad on email. At events like this, the reason I put respect to context is, in theory, if there are 20 folks who are trying to talk to somebody and you sort of get the answer, which is great, let's meet, then you can move on. I mean, that's, you have your own sales funnel with VCs, and so you've secured the next meeting, so there's no reason to spend any more time on it. This would be selling past the close. Ideally, you can pretend like I'm a customer. You know, a great way for a VC to hear a pitch, especially as more VCs rush into space, is for you to say, hey, there are 900 satellites in LEO. They all worry about deorbiting too soon. My product helps satellites deorbit. And so you sort of, you sort of set up the customer and then pitch it to somebody that is a customer. It's a really effective technique for pitching. Finally, if you do the network search, as I said, some VCs ask you to not do a cold email. They'll say, you know, if you can't find someone in my network, I don't agree with this, but if you can't find someone in my network, then you shouldn't be pitching me. But if you need to find someone in the network, you could go to the VC firm's webpage, look through their portfolio, go through your LinkedIn, see if you know anyone in any of those companies, and use that as a way to get in. I'll throw in one point. Don't say I want to talk to a partner. Don't put down associates. They can be your allies in this process, help you navigate, and these will eventually be the folks running those firms. So be polite along the way. So that is, we kind of talked about the pitfalls. So that's sort of the summary of today's talk is, if we think about evangelizing externally, think about Anavi, my little daughter, say space is easy, it's accessible, we want more folks into this area, we want more capital in this area, it's not risky. Rockets blow up 5% of the time, that's okay, that's built into our models. Parts are cheap, Rocket Lab rockets are cheap, it's now open for business. In terms of thinking about building, you know, I said I want to agree on how we're building new space companies. I'm hoping we all think about customers first and foremost, not about what we could build, but what needs to be built for the customer's satisfaction. And same thing with pitching. If you're pitching, you know, bring up customers first. Any interactions you've had at all, an email where they replied is a signal. Any signal is better than none. And then finally, let's get that innovation flywheel going so we make sure that this new space movement, we have a ton of momentum right now that it proceeds. It doesn't flail out like in the 90s, and we have a nuclear winter again, that we can keep this momentum with new space going well past an economic downturn. So in terms of building startups, I have a few links to things I love at the bottom there, sunilnagaraj.com/startups, but maybe I could take 1 or 2 questions. Thank you. All right, we have one question over here.
Sunil, you talked about 500 to 800 companies that you look at annually and funding 1 to 2 of those. How many of those are space companies?
How many of those are space companies?
Yeah.
To be clear, the numbers I was giving you are for an average, you know, pick any of the top 50 VC firms. That would be sort of any individual person there, whether it's tech or healthcare or anything. At Bessemer, we funded 3 companies over like 5 years. So we're kind of doing two in the last 2 years, so about one a year. So some of the firms I put up there are about the same pace as well, so 1 or 2 for the whole firm, which really points to the fact that there's kind of one partner. Actually, one point I meant to mention, there's kind of one partner at each of those firms that's really interested in doing space. Actually, I should rephrase that, take my own advice. There's one partner in there that sees how lucrative space can be, right? And sees it for what it really is. What that means is, in the VC mindset, that partner on Monday morning will sit in a room with 4 other partners. This person needs to prove to the other 3, this opportunity to invest in a space company is better than the next tech company, the next photo sharing app, the next enterprise SaaS app. So the bar is exactly the same. I can't think of a single completely space-focused fund right now. And so every space deal gets compared neck and neck with all the other ones. And so yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Yes.
Hi, Sunil. This is Deepak. Question I have is, as you understand with us having space startups, how do we validate our market as it's an emerging market and one that we hope to grow and hope to see it grow to a VC and show that there's potential?
Yeah, that's really tricky. One way to answer your question is I think there's two kinds of startups. There's two kinds of products. There's the products where if you ask somebody if they want it, they would say yes. And there's the other products where if you ask somebody if they want it, they would say no. And you might wonder what the second bucket is. 2007, when the iPhone came out, it was the first time you were going to type on a glass keyboard. And everyone said, that's stupid. I don't want to type on a glass keyboard. And Steve Jobs said, no, trust me. Give it 2 weeks and you'll love it, right? So it's a little bit of this delayed, it's contrary to the idea that I'm proposing, which is you can just listen to customers and take their input. Steve Jobs says you can't, it's not the customer's job to know what they want. He said that in the past. So it's tricky. I actually don't know a lot about those kind of businesses where you're building something that customers don't yet know they want, or you're building something that is going to require the coalescence of some future trends. I don't have anything smart to say about that. I'm really focused on the kind of companies that make sense. Customers say, you can describe it to customers somehow, and they will say that they want it. And that's 95% of businesses, by the way. Of course, the 5%, some of those can be the really crazy $100 billion companies, the non-intuitive ones. But I think that's more of a science. I mean, that's more of an art. I'm preferring the 95% science side. Any other questions? Maybe one more. We have one? No? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you again, Sunil, for that incredible keynote. We really appreciate that. As a CPA in my other life, it's nice to hear financial terms at a space conference, so that warms my heart a little. I wanted to take just a few moments here to talk about what we've all learned here together today over these last 3 days, and what the foundation has been doing for a lot more than these past 3 days. So the foundation, as you heard from our chairman on the first day of the conference, has been around for 29 years. We've been advocating for commercial space that entire time, and there's been tremendous successes along the way. The industry, as we've all seen, has flourished dramatically in the past couple of years. And I hope that we can all take these lessons that we've all learned today to continue that message. The foundation is not only here to advocate for the industry, but what we ultimately want to see is permanent human settlement of space. And that is what we're all here to do today, and that's what our theme of convergence has been all about. We want to bring together all of these people in these rooms together, these influencers, these ideas, and all these incredible new technologies which we've heard about during our quickfire discussions, and keep that all moving in the right direction so that one day we'll all be looking up to the stars and seeing not just the moon, but seeing and knowing that there are people out there living on these other planets, and whether it's Mars, the moon, or wherever it may be, that what the work that people in this room and the people in this industry have done over the last several years and will continue to do in the future, that we've all made this possible. So with that, I hope you've met someone new at this conference. I hope you've learned something new about a new technology or a new idea, and I hope that you can really take that with you to continue this mission that we all share of getting up there and staying out there. Only together can we really accomplish this, and only together can we really keep pushing the frontier and the boundaries of the frontier and succeeding in our ultimate goals. I'm so happy that we can honor everyone during our keynotes over these past few days. I look forward to honoring a number of the truly incredible advocates of this organization and this industry and these goals tonight at our award ceremony. I know we've been talking about it all day, but if you haven't picked up your tickets yet, please do so outside. And if you'd like to purchase a ticket, those are still available. So with that, I just want to say again, thank you all for joining. Let's keep these conversations going, both this afternoon, this evening, and then also in the future. So you've all heard from not just myself and not just other members of the board. We've got a very busy year ahead of us. As Minister Schneider said on Tuesday, we'll be hosting our first ever international conference in Luxembourg. It'll be November 16th and 17th in Luxembourg City, and we're so grateful for the support of the government of Luxembourg in bringing this incredible torch of NewSpace over the pond to Europe. And then also to cap off another year of incredible progress for both our team and the foundation, I can officially announce that we will indeed be returning to Seattle next year. We had an incredible conference last year in Seattle. It was our first time in the city, and the city welcomed us with open arms. We had a great group of supporters, a great group of sponsors, some really awesome events, and we hope to continue that momentum and continue these conversations, not just in Luxembourg, but also in Seattle next year. And lastly, to close, I want to thank not only the people in the room that made this possible, and not only the speakers that came and gave these incredible discussions, but also the volunteers. Many of you don't know, but this conference is ran by a team of entirely volunteers. There's 36 of us that have been working tirelessly for almost 8 months now through Google Hangouts across the country, and lots of late nights, lots of early morning phone calls, and it's been a tremendous amount of effort to put this event on, and I can't express my gratitude enough to the team of volunteers that have done this. We're so very lucky to have some of the brightest minds in not only the aerospace industry, but also just some of the brightest minds in the country working on this event, and we're so grateful for them. So with that, thank you everyone, thank you volunteers, and come see us this evening. Thank you.